Okay, there's this black slab, which actually is a MIST FPGA implementation. A while ago I made a video on the Chameleon 64, which also was an FPGA, but this actually is a computer based on an FPGA implementation, field programmable grid array. Basically it does in parallel what a software emulator would not be able to do, and thus make an emulator a lot more compatible in theory than a software emulator. Has an SD card, it has some LEDs, it has 3 buttons, it has MIDI ports, which is actually excellent if you want to run it as an Atari ST, because you can use the Cubase sequencer software on it. There's 4 USB 2 ports, there's a power port, there's a switch, audio jack, VGA out, and there's 2 9-pin joystick connectors. What I do is I hook up this mouse. It's a Logitech mouse. I'll just put in the USB. Well, it's always a bit of a mess. Like so. Now, what I hook up to it also is this. It's a gamepad. It's one of these 8-bit do thingies with 2 analog sticks, shoulder buttons. Pretty much a retro gaming pad. It's Bluetooth, but you can hook it up over USB, and I'm going to do that. Going to hook up these speakers, this 4x3 monitor, and have the whole setup work. So yeah, let's hook it all up. Well, I've got a stack of SD cards in order to use it. I've turned on the monitor, I'm turning on the speakers, and I'm turning on the system. And what it does is that it shows you a menu, depending on what you have on the SD card, or it boots a default core. The mouse is supported, a USB keyboard, a Dell USB keyboard, and you can use the cursor keys to navigate around. And you just press enter to launch a core. And there you have, well, the monitor will have to readjust, but yeah, basically you have an implementation of an Amstrad CPC in hardware on the FPGA. By pressing F12 in most cores, you'll get a menu. You can load in a disk, and you'll be able to run the game. So yeah, let's mount a camera on a tripod and just show you off some of the implementations. Quite a few of these cores work excellently. Others require a bit of more work, but yeah, using this with an older 4x3 monitor actually is fantastic. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked with my little retro emulation corner. I actually interchanged that with my MK1 C64 Reloaded that I use with a Chameleon 64 or 1541 Ultimate 2. But yeah, let's go check out the Mister, or the MIST machine in action. Okay, let's turn on the machine. And you're presented with fake static and a couple of cores that the system uses. Now, I tried to record this video, but the wife stepped outside and she's actually scraping the windows of her car like a madwoman. So you may actually hear that. Poor girl. Anyways, These are some of the cores that you are able to start up. Atari 2600, Amstrad CPC, Apple II, Aquarius, Archimedes, that doesn't work, Esther, Cade, consoles, Atari ST, C16, Commodore 64, various variants. Some of them are compatible with loading in cartridge. The others do 1541 disk drive emulation. One actually does Jiffy DOS, so fast loading. One is specialized in loading T64 tapes. It's really crazy. ColecoVision, PC Engine, some arcade ports, Galaxians, Game Boy, Genesis, Invaders, Moon Patrol, Minimig, that's the Amiga port. I actually got this system for the Amiga emulation, and the rest is all a bonus. Nintendo Entertainment System, Pac-Man Pango, 2 arcade ports, Pet, Plus 2, which is a classic Mac emulation, ZX Spectrum QL emulation, Sam Coupé, which is a French derivative somewhat of the Spectrum software line. I mean, yeah, it is fairly easy to get Spectrum software running on the Sam Coupé. Wonderful system. Really didn't get as big as it deserved. Sega Master System, Super Chip, VIC-20, Video Pack, Odyssey 2, ZX81, and the ZX Spectrum. And let's just show you a couple of the ports and just, you know, some samples of software running. Atari 2600, and this actually boots up in a very nice looking, amazing looking demo. That's actually a demo that works on real hardware as well. They just hard coded it to load it by default into the core. Most cores, if you press F12 on the USB keyboard, you get into some sort of menu where you can do all sorts of settings, change all sorts of settings, and with this core you actually have the choice to navigate towards certain areas, but you can just boot up any system, any game. I mean, I'm a bit tired, so I'm all over the place. Let's do the iconic. Oh wait, this is interesting. These are actually reprogrammed versions, reprogrammed cartridges. Donkey Kong. This is Donkey Kong reimagined on the VCS. And yeah, I press start. It doesn't do sound for some reason, which is weird because on the real hardware it does do sound, but it uses some sort of fancy interlaced graphics. You will probably won't be able to see this properly on the screen. Oh, this is something weird. One up, is there? I forgot. You should be able to start this. This is just looping. I don't think this actually wants to start. Let's see this one. So yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. As you can see, the start screen is a bit weird. And there should be sound. But these are recent ports of the... yeah, there's something weird. There's something weird going on. So I guess they use some sort of techniques that just isn't compatible with, because you know the score just goes up like crazy and the time doesn't run down. So I guess they use some sort of feature that the FPGA implementation of the 2600 just doesn't. Ooh, that really ramps up high. Let's go for a classic. Pac-Man. Now this is so bad that it's actually good. We all played this home version of Pac-Man with the flickering sprites. You might not be able to see them properly because this camera is not filming at the same frame rate. Whoop. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the standard 2600 cartridges actually work on this. It's easy to change to a different core by pressing F12. Most cores allow you to change the FPGA core. And yeah, sometimes you just have to do an extra reset, because when the FPGA is loaded with another core, it needs to reset. But sometimes it retains certain features of the previous core, so you might be better off resetting the thing. Well, this is the Schneider version. You can actually change that around. This has the brand name Schneider, but you can do it Amstrad, and you can reset it. I'll leave it to Schneider for now. Schneider was sold in France, the Netherlands, and Germany. The rest had Amstrad as a brand name. Most of the cores, they have additional information on which BIOS files you should use, or which directory should be on the card where it expects certain files to be. So you just insert a disk and you press CAT, which you do on and then you do load. Now all the special keys are actually mapped on a similar spot on the keyboard as on the original. So the quotes are actually on Shift 2, where on my keyboard it's an @ sign. But yeah, if you know the computer, the original computer, it won't be any problem, because you'll have that position of the keys in your fingertips anyways. And you could type run quote and then it'll just run automatically. I believe it was return, and then return, and then press fire to just let it work. Boulder Dash. The port on the Amstrad really takes proper advantage of the system. It does do some pretty nice scrolling. It's not the best. I mean, Commodore 64, Atari 8-bit was more successful in producing nice scrolling, but they had it in hardware. But the port on the Atari 8-bit was the original. The Spectrum had a port, the Amstrad CPC and the C64. The C64 and the Amstrad had ports that looked pretty similar, if not identical, to the original 8-bit system. But yeah, you can see it runs pretty well, and it does do a lot of other games as well. But in the interest of time, let's change the firmware and check out Apple II. Apple II is also emulated. It'll just show the Apple II logo. Now, by pressing the same F12, you can actually mount disks, and you navigate towards Apple II. Only nibble format images are supported. And Shira Walt Disney Disc 1 of 3, Side A. And they are supposed to boot from it once they are inserted. But I have little success with running Apple II on the FPGA. Some people may have better success. And I'm not sure if actually the inserted disk Castle Wolfenstein, and then cold reset. Castle Wolfenstein. Yeah, a Mockingboard. I just turned on the Mockingboard implementation. That may actually have something to do with a disk, because it now seems to. Yeah. So yeah. You really need to know the hardware and the hardware configuration of these very old systems to be able to work them. But yeah, this is just J for joysticks. I seem to have left off somewhere. But yeah, if you have Apple software, Apple II software, and you can have it in nibble format, you'll be able to use it on the MIST FPGA system with this core. Oh, resuming where you left off, it was waiting for a key press. Now, it probably was defined to work with. Oh, it's still calculating and stuff. Well, you know, Apple II software, it does work. let's change the FPGA core to the Aquarius. The Aquarius MIST, that's also an old home computer. It defaults to scan lines in this build. Save settings. Now it doesn't anymore. But yeah, it boots into a basic. When I look at this screen, it reminds me of a Texas Instruments system, which it isn't. I have very little. Experience with the Aquarius. Let's see if loading in one of these images, Night Stalker. And I'm not sure if. Oh, look at that. So I guess the flashing symbol is something that you want to get. Oh, and I can shoot. Whoops, and I can be shot. Bloody hell. It's a tough game, but Night Stalker, quite an interesting. Whoa, quite an interesting game. But should I? Oh, there's some sort of key that I need to get. And there's bats floating around. Very nicely done. They do seem to be just character. So, and well, yeah. So it's a tough game, a maze game. But so yeah, let's change another. I mean, if you have been using this in the past, you know, it might be the best thing since sliced bread. Archimedes, if I press enter, and I will, it will just stop with a red LED. I just have to find the correct files so that the core will actually work with it. But from reading up with it, it's actually in very preliminary stages, and I don't think it's being worked on anymore. So yeah, it's probably something that I will wipe from the card. Esther Cade, it's a very old console, a cartridge-based console, and it defaults with one of the games, for example Gunfight. You have that on many other systems. And I'm not sure if I'm not sure if the joysticks is actually configured properly, but yeah, two soldiers shooting each other. Very old-fashioned. Probably can load in something else. Let me see. Where is it? Oh, I can't even find it. Oh well. Let's change the core. Well, we've seen the 2600 core. The 5200 core also doesn't want to work for me. It needs a 5200 bin file, a proper bin file, which I don't have. Hence, the core doesn't want to work because it contains the BIOS information. I have a bit more luck with the Atari 8-bit core. It does come into the basic prompt, but loading in software actually is quite difficult. You press enter to browse the SD card for the game files that are on there, but for some reason it really just has a very hard time doing that. Now it starts to load, and then it just waits. It's possible to load in XEX files, which are here it is, which are executables. Let me see, Arkanoid Taito, and then exit, list, run, no, perhaps reset. F10. Yeah, F10. It's, you know, some of these cores, they really have mapped the functions to a different system. Now, some of them some of these X files you really need to load with BASIC turned off, otherwise they just won't work. Others will work. It's fairly easy to boot an Atari 8-bit, the real machine, but how to do it with the FPGA core needs a bit of investigation. Joystick, one player mode. I think I just press start. So I mean, it's a very complete emulator or implementation of the Atari 8-bit hardware. So I mean, it does run a ton of games, but getting it to work properly. Certain cores are much easier to use than others, but probably it's just a matter of just reading up on the instructions. But yeah, this game was very popular with a lot of people. I'm very bad at it. It's basically Pong on steroids. But yeah, you can see that just, you know, running Arkanoid and a lot of other classics is very, very possible with this system. Pressing F12, you get to the menu for most, but not with this core. This is a very egotistical core that just does things its own way. So you press reset on the system. Atari ST. Atari ST is also implemented quite well. The thing is that it defaults to a high resolution graphics mode that my system really doesn't like, my TV doesn't really like. But you can actually insert discs and it should boot from them. Let me see. Pac-Mania, for example. Pac-Mania. And then system. And then reset. It should actually boot Pac-Mania. I'm not sure if it will. Test aborted. Yeah, Pac-Mania. So it's less compatible than the Minimig configuration, but it does want to work. Music is on. Start game. Now I think on the 16-bit systems, Pac-Mania on the Atari ST is actually one of the lesser ports, just because of the music and the lack of Blitter hardware supporting the. So yeah, I mean, it should work, right? I mean, there it is. And you just, I mean, it scrolls all right, but you see that the scoring is actually taken up by a huge portion of the screen, half. And it's a different version of Pac-Man. Oh, and it actually lags. If I press the fire button once, it actually keeps on pressing it, so it jumps like 3 times in a row. So yeah, I'm not very impressed by the Atari ST port, and I believe actually the Atari ST MIST was actually based emulating the Atari ST was actually a big part of it actually. But yeah, in this game it just a bit off because it just jumps like 3 times in a row, which it shouldn't. So yeah, I've not had many, and perhaps it's also a matter of trying to see. Yeah, and now it just doesn't want to. Oh, firmware and core. Let's check out the. Let me see, Atari ST core. That's a bit of a different implementation. It helps to have various versions of these cores on your card because some have different features and are more compatible, and have features taken out that weren't working in other versions of the software. The thing is that the FPGA is limited in size and is also limited in holy crap, I'm not sure what that was, but seagulls. Now, so the FPGA is limited in size, limited in what it can do, and so yeah, it's that's the downside of using this FPGA implementation. Sometimes you're hindered by how complex the system is that you want to implement. But here you have the Commodore Basic prompt, which is actually the +4 prompt. It says a C16 core, but it does actually a 64K. Yeah, well, the +4 is actually a C16. You can mount D64 images, but you can also load directly into memory PRG files, which actually probably is the best way to go. And attack, why not? So this loads it instantly into memory, and you just press run, and it decrunches, and you have a well, it's not a C64 game, but it's a C16 game. You probably have to press spacebar because it's a crack throw. Press fire to start, 1 player. Oh wow. It's some sort of space shooting thing. Oh, is there? Oh, there's something coming towards me. Oh, this is actually quite a nice looking game. Is there some sort of whoa? There's all sorts of critters coming my way, which I don't see. Oh, there, another one. Bloody hell, and then I'm dead. Okay, so C16, pretty cool. Then, of course, after the C16 you have C64, and I'll just load the version that will be able to use a cartridge form. This one does PRG T64 top and cartridge. Let's see if I can run a cart. A nice one. Defender, for example. And it just runs the cards. Now the Commodore 64 implementation in FPGA is quite good. It's not as perfect as the one that you find in the Chameleon, but it's pretty okay. You can actually emulate. You can turn on the system in NTSC format or PAL format. It's great if you are in the States and you are and you want to see the demos that are programmed into hard coded into PAL, more or less. Whoops. Then you are able to run the PAL software as it was intended. And of course, for us living in PAL country, it's actually quite nice to be able to run certain software at the slightly higher speeds that it was intended for. But yeah, this actually is a very nice Commodore 64 bonus for me. I mean, the Commodore 64 implementation is actually quite good. It does emulate the hard drive, so it does also does all sorts of weird speed load and weird disks and stuff. So it runs a lot of the software. Now another big thing for me is the fact that this actually does ColecoVision. You can load in ColecoVision and bin cartridges, and yeah, you can load in a lot of the existing software, but also great for using homebrew. For example, EA Classics, running on the FPGA, Meteor Swarm, Birds of Orion, Munchmania. Let's go for Meteor Swarm. Whoop, and it does work. Whoa. Wow, bloody hell. Yeah, it works best with the original software, I guess. But yeah, ColecoVision works. Also, Electric Adventures cartridge does work on it. Just had to show that. PC Engine, that's a bit of a, yeah, it's an older core. I've seen this core actually on the Chameleon as well. You may actually get some sort of weird interference. It's a bit of a troubled core. It does work, but it's not as slick as the other cores. It's of a previous generation for some reason. PC Engine. And here you can have the, well, Corion, Child of Dragon. And it loads in the game, and then it just runs it. For some reason, it wants to do the, yeah. It does do the scanline thing also, which I'm not a big fan of, but yeah, the games, they run, but now the sound is cutting out. So I mean, yeah, not perfect. It's an older implementation of the cores in the ROM. There's actually quite a few versions. Scan lines, no. Yeah, that's better. And I'm not sure why the sound wasn't working. Press the run button. Yeah. It does seem to hang if you press the start button, which is the enter button. It might actually run now. No. So you see troubles. It's a troubled core, so I'm not using it. I mean, it's on there for demonstration purposes. Some games run better at it than others, but yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. You can see. It's actually quite a task getting this. But yeah, I mean, MIST C64 is probably more, you know, rounded than the ColecoVision. But I mean, you can run different. ColecoVision, PC Engine, firmware and core. Where were we? PC Engine. I believe blazing lasers is no issues, for example, but. PC Engine, oh bloody hell. PC Engine, blazing lasers. And this also uses scan lines. Let's get rid of these scan lines. Save the settings, that might actually help. Exit. Press the run button. I think certain games just push the hardware in a different way. Well, but when I was playing this, yeah, blazing lasers, it just works. You know, the music works, the scrolling works, everything just works. So I guess certain games are just not as, well, they might use features that the hardware implementation of the PC Engine just, you know, doesn't like that much. It just isn't implemented. This, all these games, they run at 60 Hertz, full frame, so no flickering. And the camera that I'm using actually doesn't do it justice because it only films at 25 or 30 frames per second. So the cool thing about me using an LCD, an old LCD monitor for this, a 4x3, which is actually the best way to use a screen like this, a system like this. It doesn't flicker, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot smoother and more perfect in real life than you experience in with this video camera. But this is just showing off. I don't think you'll be able to exit this. No, this is also like the Atari 8-bit core, different generation. They didn't have the developing platform in place because now you have some sort of software or you have some sort of a standard environment where you can just put your FPGA implementation into, so it more or less has the same consistent interface. Let me see, PC Engine, Galaxian. Yeah, I believe this is sideways and it doesn't feature sound or something. I'm not sure, but yeah, it could be that this actually works. Yeah, it's yeah, and you have to reset it. Yeah, I just don't care that much for the arcade games because they're buggy, and I think from a FPGA system design standpoint, it's actually quite interesting. But Game Boy, that's also a bit of a weird one. I believe it's also stemming from the old batches. Oh, it does have the Game Boy loader, but I think it's a bit weird. Let me see. Battletoads, that's a cool one, and I think Battletoads. So it uses the 4:3 aspect ratio of the system. Let me see if it actually. Well, it does run full speed, and you can pick up the stuff. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there are some glitches. Look, where the frog is, the toad is. There's this square that isn't supposed to be there. So I mean, if you think about, you know, using FPGA to emulate your systems, or want to go to emulate a you know, you think it's much better than, for example, a Raspberry Pi, you're mistaken, because, you know, it's only as good as the hardware implementation that is put in. So you have nicely rounded emulators, and you have nicely rounded FPGA implementations. So the Game Boy, the PC Engine, they're a bit rough on the edges, you know. So yeah, I wouldn't buy this system just for the Game Boy emulation, but I bought this system for something else, and I believe, yeah, not for the Genesis Mega Drive implementation either. I think this boots up with a similar, yeah, so this actually is one of the load ROM, and now we have to go to Mega Genesis. Let me see. La, la, la. Where are the directories? You see, this is just something that Atari ST, C64, NES, Amstrad, SMS, Gen. So let's see, Battletoads, another one. Battletoads. Now, yeah, for some reason these blue, these cores with the blue implementation just aren't that well rounded, and over time, and they use a return enter key for the implementation of the start button. Look, there are some sprite issues. So, you know, not something that I would buy this system for. You don't buy this for the Genesis Mega Drive implementation. Oh, I'd better reset it. What I did buy it for was actually the Amiga implementation, because that, for me, is very solid. C64, Galaxian Invaders, yeah, the Minimig. I'll press enter and I'll let you see what happens. It is emulating a 68020 AGA chipset. It has a custom boot loader thing, and it uses the SD card for storage. It's possible to emulate various versions of the Amiga, the 600, the 500, the 1200 to some extent, you can load in ADF images and boot the games that way, but you can also do this, which is my Workbench implementation, or at least the classic Workbench implementation that I have running on my Amiga. And my 1200 Amigas, I've got two, they're both on the fridge. So I more or less recreated my file system. It does a lot of great things. For example, it does allow you to run quite a bit of the oh look, that's Dopus, Directory Opus, Quit, Music, Eagle Player, Delhi Tracker, Eagle Player. It uses a lot of the, and you can load in mods, for example. S3, I'm not sure if that actually supported. No amplifier found. Yeah, I think it just, this one just does basic mods. And I mean, it does multitask and stuff, so it's actually a great way to just use your old Amiga applications. What also works well, of course, is WHD load. And there's a couple of state of the art. F10 to quit. It does do a lot of the WHD load things. Oh, I think this is Me Too inappropriate. That these days, you know, it's just. Anyways, let me see. Work disk. No, I've got system info. I wanted to show you guys the speed. Well, as you can see, this is just a far more rounded, tools. Sysinfo. This is a far more rounded core than the others. And this basically is very compatible. Let me see, speed. It's actually quite fast. What it lacks is an FPU, so that actually makes it a lot slower in certain things. But yeah, as you can see, it's faster than a 1200. It's faster than an Amiga 3000. It's about a third of the speed of an Amiga 4000, and it has 7.12 megaflops. And you can configure the memory in all sorts of ways. I've maxed it out, but you can do less. You can do less. If you press F12, you get this. You get this configuration tool. You can insert certain disks and stuff. You'll be able to have different configurations. You can have it boot up as an Amiga 500 and just boot the ADF files, or you can just have it run like games. Let me see, Pac-Mania. I'm in need of some Pac-Mania, because on this system it just runs so much better than it does on the Pac-Mania. Let me see, Pac-Mania. F10 to quit, and it'll just load it from the hard drive, and it'll just work. A lot of the games, not every game will work, but yeah, I mean it works well enough. I think I should press, yeah, so start the game, and I'm able to select and then just press fire. And I'm able to play a ton of Amiga 1200 games this way, or Amiga 500 games, or Amiga games, and it's better than emulation because it actually responds a whole lot faster, quicker than the Amiga emulator WUEA or something does. I mean, it does feel like you're playing this on a real machine. Now, the downside of using LCD screen is that it does do some scaling. So I see some scaling effects on my screen, but for the most part, this old HPL 1950G actually does a stellar job. And if you press the fire button, it's not registering. It thrice like it does on the Atari ST. Whoops. And I've tend to quit. And you're back in the workbench. So yeah, you can imagine that I just transferred all my games and my music and all that stuff to this system. And it actually is a wonderful Amiga for me. Now, it's not a real Amiga with all the hardware ports that you have on a real Amiga. But some people have been taking it online even with this system. Not sure how they did it, because it doesn't have an Ethernet port. But for some reason they got USB to work for it. Let me see if I can try a different FPGA core. Now NES does work. Let me see. You just press and you'll just load in a game. Let me see. No, just a regular game that I play a lot. People will grow tired of it, I guess. Let me see. Gunnack. Gunnack is also a Boulder Dash. That's also a nice one. So pretty solid emulation. Not all the ports, not all the memory mappers are supported, but it's good enough. It plays the majority. I think it plays about 80 to 90% of the games. With all the weird idiosyncrasies, like I mean, on the TV you would have overscan would just have these border effects not appearing. So this is actually not a fault of the implementation, but on the top and the right you can actually see things being amiss a bit. But that's just because of the fact that it also happens in real hardware. But yeah, quite a different port, at least different graphics compared to the Amstrad and the Commodore 64 Atari 8-bit ports. It's the Japanese spin on things, I guess. But yeah, you can see NES works pretty well. Let me see what else. Pet, which is a Commodore Pet. Now, it has not implemented a lot of things, but you can load in tape and program things. So let's see if I can get a Pet into the Pet directory. CBM Pet. So I guess there was this Space Invaders program. Run. Begin game. They even, and that's a cool thing, they even implemented the, they even implemented the sounds, which is not standard on a Pet. Let's load a different core. The +2. So they even implemented sounds on the Pet, which actually is a thing you plug into the cartridge port, I believe, or the tape port. Now, if you have plus images, you put them on the drive, and you'll be able to boot them. Let me see if I have images. I don't think so. I don't think I have yet. Apple II. No. I don't think I have images yet. But yeah, you'll be able to play quite a few of the old Plus classics. You know, there's Shuffle Puck Cafe, for example, and quite a few other old monochrome games that run actually quite well on this. Let me see what else. QL. Well, I didn't own a QL back in the day. I don't know much about the QL, but it's supposedly it's actually quite good. I have yet to experience it more, but yeah, it's something that actually works, and it's actually well rounded. The Sam Coupé. The Sam Coupé, Miles Gordon technology. Let me see. Load in a disk. Sam Coupé. Oh, you can actually have Spectrum software running. No way. I don't think it'll work. Oh. Then there too. Bloody hell. No. Oh look, there's some errors, but yeah, Spectrum software running on the Sam Coupé, which is very much related to the Spectrum, but which isn't a Spectrum, but you had all sorts of emulators on it. Of course, there's a ton of native games for it as well. Let me see. The Fender compilation. Oh yeah, and you have to reboot it. I'm not sure how to do it yet, but yeah, it works. It's nice. Sam Coupé. Sega Master System, also a trouble port. Don't buy the system for it. I believe it also comes up with this blue little file selector thingy. Oh, something else. Now this emulator is actually, or this FPGA implementation is actually so difficult that on quite a few monitors it doesn't display correctly. On mine it does. Afterburner World. Press start button. I mean, the games that it does play, it runs well, but the aspect ratio is all wrong. Yep. So that's the ZX Spectrum. Now this actually is also a very nice thing. So the Amiga and the ZX Spectrum implementation are some things that I really like. Because it does do, hopefully, no, not this one. Oh gosh, it's also always. Oh, I don't think it's on here. I think I put it on a different. I think I put it on a different. I don't think it does this. I don't think the directories are on there. No, it also does. Let me see if I can load in a file. No, load. Oh bloody hell. Oh yeah, nice. I'm not using this version. I'm using a different version, but I'll put in a different SD card and load the Spectrum core from that. As you can see, it's not perfect. It's not perfect by a long shot. Putting in a different SD card and turning on the system. Ah, this is actually quite cool. This is the BBC, I believe it's a BBC Model B, or it could actually be a Master, I'm not sure. But what this does do is actually implement that MMC SD card interface thingy. where you can have all the games that you are familiar with from the BBC. You can actually have at your fingertips. Boulder Dash, Tynesoft. I'm not sure if that actually works. And I think, yeah, it does do. Oh, you can choose the colors and stuff, but yeah, I mean, of course, all these use keyboard controls. Some of them actually use controls for the joystick, but yeah, most of them are actually keyboard controls only. So let me see. Reset. And there's a ton of classics on there. And the thing is that the scaling is a bit off on this monitor. You'll see that certain lines are a bit thicker than others. So yeah, this is the fact. This is due to the monitor not scaling the output as perfectly as you want it to. But for me, it's good enough. It prevents me from having to bring out my Beeb. ZX and space to serve. Well, let's see. One player, just one. Press space to start. Holy crap! And I think you can also do something with the speed and stuff. But yeah. And now there's some other cores on here. The MSX. These cores, the MSX core, as well as the Beeb core, they want to have a disk, an SD disk. They want to have that in, and it actually boots into MSX. Yeah, and it has issues running, reading from the SD card. Retry, and you're better off actually resetting it again. It has issues. I mean, the MSX implementation is not perfect. They stopped developing it, and it's very picky. As you can see, I did the same thing, but it's very picky when it comes to SD cards, timing issues and stuff. If you're lucky, you'll be able to navigate towards a ROM. And you'll be able to run that ROM. But if you're unlucky, like me now, right now, you won't be able to run it because of the read issues. Now, thank God it doesn't corrupt the drives, but it's a pain. I mean, I would have loved for this system to be just like this open MSX, MSX1 compatible type of system, you know, just being perfect, but it's not. And you know, after a bit of trial and error, you might be able to get a game running. Now it does want to boot from the SD card, which it just doesn't. It doesn't initialize booting from the SD card. Because it's actually so crappy, the MSX implementation, which I really am very sorry about, it just defaults into the Beeb, which actually it does quite well, but it also needs the same FAT12 or FAT16 implementation. But I'm able to change into the Open MSX core, or not Open MSX core. No, it's different. It has nothing to do with Open MSX. That's actually a lot better in software than this is in hardware. But yeah, you can see for some weird reason it just stuffs up, and then it just doesn't want to load into BASIC, or it just doesn't want to load into DOS. I think if you give it time, it's really weird, but if you give it time, it seems to be loading in the games just a bit better. This is a smaller ROM, only 16K. This might actually fare a bit better. Let's press enter. It doesn't really want to, does it? Ignore, retry, abort, time pilot. So yeah, I mean, it sucks. It's not something that, you know, you really would buy the system for. Actually, the way this demonstration is going, you should really wonder where you would buy the system for. And I think it's definitely worth buying if you want a nice implementation of Amiga, because I find very little faults with the Amiga. The C64 actually works quite a bit better. Now this is a 2 GB cartridge that defaults to MSX. A different SD card, a slower SD card, and let's see if I'm able to. Let me see. Time pilot. Retry, abort. Hey. No. So, don't buy this system for the MSX implementation, because it really sucks. It really doesn't do a good job. Let's put in a different SD card. This is actually the final SD card that I'm going to demonstrate. Bloody hell. I'm losing my eyesight, and I'm losing it fast. It really is very bothersome. Let me see. This is a 1 GB drive, which I believe I've also put on MSX. No, this is the Minimig. So I put on, yeah, this is just, could be that this also has an implementation of the, I'm not sure. I've been toying around with a ton of these old games, but yeah, it seems to be just a simple implementation of my Amiga also. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's not the for me it's an ultimate system. I'll zoom in on it. It's actually down below. It's a black box about the size of an iPhone 6, 7 or 8 Plus, and then stacked together about an inch thick, an inch high, I think, perhaps even a bit higher. It's a wonderful system for Amiga and for Commodore 64, Atari 2600, Amstrad CPC, ZX Spectrum. Yeah, for some reason I'm missing out on the ZX Spectrum. It's really weird, and it's really temperamental, because I think that I did put, let me see, this is, how big is this image? This is 4 GB? Yeah, this is a 4 GB. I did put the ZX Spectrum software on one of the cards, and in such a way that it actually uses the div IDE interface to access the SD card and load in a ton of games. But for some reason, it doesn't seem to want to do it. ZX Spectrum. Oh, and now it does. Yep. The same card. I guess resetting the system, if you load in an FPGA implementation, and without resetting the system, you might run into issues with it not working as you wanted it to work. So this actually is very similar to what you would find on a div IDE interface, and basically it incorporates it. For example, Spectrum Dir, and yeah, this is just the big interface. Let me see, there's a couple of demos. Z80 demos. They load in the fastest. PC Tank, I'm not sure what this is, but yeah, I mean it does work well if it works well. So Spectrum C64, Atari 2600, Amiga, ZX Spectrum, BBC Master, BBC Model B, those systems actually work really well on it. The other systems are a bit more hit and miss, and I wouldn't buy the system if you want to do anything else beside Amiga, Commodore 64, Spectrum, you know? So I'll leave you, and well, yeah, whatever.